Well, welcome for another How Conversation on Moral Leadership with the How Institute for Society. I am just really thrilled. I think you can always tell in my voice and hopefully my expressions that it's an honor to have with us as our guest and contributor today, Dr. Beth Hillman. She's an extraordinary leader, and I will just say her journey spans over multiple different sectors, and that includes military service, her legal scholarship, as well as educational leadership, and now stewardship of our national memory as president and CEO of the 9/11 Memorial and Museum.
Dana, it's great to be here. It's really a privilege. I'm across the street from the 9/11 Memorial and Museum, and I have an office up high enough that I can see the memorial pools, and I have some of the books that I've picked up along the way from my academic and other journeys behind me here. So it's great to be with you.
It is fantastic. So Beth began her career similarly aligned with my Air Force career. She was an Air Force officer who served 7 years as a space operations officer in a very important area, then Cheyenne Mountain Air Force Base. I think now we're space, and also doing a lot of our Northern Command and behind the scenes in the mountain in Colorado. Then became a history professor at the Air Force Academy, and a lot of educational assignments leading to the 14th president of Mills College, which for our listeners was the first women's college west of the Rockies. That during your tenure as president, I know you focused a lot of your time and heart and passion and energy into inclusivity and transformation through the COVID times, as well as a merger with Northeastern University. So Dr. Beth Hillman is a leadership personified and exemplifies moral courage, civic responsibility, as well as, and not the least of, a commitment that is profound in the way that you remember, and I would say how you remember, as well as how we move forward together. So Dr. Beth Hillman, it is just wonderful to have you with us in this How Conversation on Moral Leadership. Welcome. And we're going to jump into our first question, which is really getting to know you a little bit more, the person and the professional, in terms of your journey that you've been on, the zigs and zags of your life and your leadership, and who and what has inspired you and led to the way that you think about influencing today.
You know, like many people, I think my family of origin had the first impact. I chose the Air Force because my father served in the Army Air Force during World War II. My parents certainly had a huge impact on me. My mom was very proud of the degree that she had earned. She studied dietetics at Seton Hill College, not too far from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I grew up. And she did an internship in Rochester, New York, that she was very proud of. But when she became pregnant with my oldest brother, I have 4 siblings, she left the workforce and didn't go back until my sister and I were in grade school. But I learned a tremendous amount from my parents, my siblings, my teachers, and my coaches. And then when I got into the Air Force, I ended up in a Purple Service Command, U.S. Space Command, and I learned from officers of all the branches of service in the United States, as well as Canadian Forces folks. So they were all really important in helping shape my own approach, which I didn't realize I was always developing. I was a little more self-conscious about leadership than other young people because of the Air Force and the military's emphasis on developing leadership as a young, in its officers, because of the responsibility that they take on. But I didn't, I think, fully appreciate what I was getting from that until much later.
But I love how you described yourself in terms of not only influencing, but who you were influenced by. And you've kind of described yourself that way in the past as a cumulative sum of the parts, taking lessons from each phase of your life. So in terms of leadership, how do you build and reinforce a personal framework that guides your decisions along vastly different roles, which you have held? And what are some of the constants, right? The constant values that you lead with, regardless of which role that you are exemplifying or performing within?
Early on, when I was still a cadet in Air Force ROTC and studying at Duke, and I only studied electrical engineering because the Air Force gave me a scholarship in it. I probably would not have chosen it otherwise, but the Air Force was giving almost all of its scholarships in electrical engineering, and I wanted to get one. So I said, sure, I'll be an electrical engineer. But while I was studying that, one of my summers I spent at the Pentagon in the Strategic Defense Initiative organization, and I worked with some senior officers, and they took a trip out to Colorado Springs. And we were in a lot of meetings in a lot of different places in a lot of different offices. And I didn't always know what was going on. The language they were using was unfamiliar to me. The programs, the satellites that they were working on weren't ones I was familiar with. I was at the very beginning of my understanding of Air Force Space Command as it was at the time. There was no Space Force yet. You know, we were Space Command, and then U.S. Space Command within the U.S. Air Force. And after one meeting, I remember saying to one of the colonels with us, I think I'm going to skip this next one. I said, I'm not really sure. I'm not really following everything that's going on. And he said, oh, yeah, definitely don't come. You know, you might learn something. And I thought, okay, I'm hearing that it's important to stay engaged, even when it might feel like not everything is clear. And I really think that's true. It's possible to learn from virtually every context. And so for me, a principle of leadership is realizing there's something to be gained from every conversation and every interaction with people across organizations and across the communities of interest that we serve when we're in leadership positions. So it has really helped me to recognize, even if it's not all making sense, as I encounter it, if I have the patience and the wherewithal to stick with it, it will actually help me understand something better. And the next time I hear that jargon, or that next time I'm in something similar to that context, it will be a little bit easier.
So as you've moved through these new spaces and roles, especially ones that history and complexity are clearly deep, how do you approach this early period as you're going into new positions of listening and learning, and as you said, being patient in this new space, but also persistent in terms of practice? And what kind of intentional principles help you as you build trust or try to build trust to acclimatize to this new environment? Because so many of us are going through these, like into the new, the imposter syndrome in this new role.
Yeah, I have learned from many of the folks I've encountered about what works, and I think as long as I keep listening, they keep teaching me new ways to do it. One of the constants for me has been meeting people just physically, materially, where they are. Some people describe this as shoe leather. Wearing out shoe leather, meaning visit faculty in their offices, visit our visitor services staff on the plaza, visit students in classrooms, visit museum visitors, as they encounter the exhibits in the museum, and watch them and talk to them. I think that if I can bring people to the space that I'm in, and sometimes it's helpful to, summon people or to invite people in, but actually getting out of the office that I'm in much of the time, surrounded by books that provide some of my context, and into where other people are, it makes a big difference. Here at the 9/11 Memorial Museum, the memorial pools are a great example. We have a very complex physical plant at the 9/11 Memorial Museum. We essentially have a skyscraper that goes underground 7 stories down to bedrock, where the World Trade Center towers, the Twin Towers, once stood. And in the footprint of each of those towers is a pool. Each of them has 500,000 gallons of water circulating through them. There's massive pumps inside there. And to go with the engineers and look at the pumps and the filters, and talk to them about that and recognize what they're managing. I'm never going to be the one who sets the pressure on the pump or responds to a problem when something happens on the Memorial Plaza. But for me to understand where they are and what they've done, I get a sense of the pride they have in their mission. And I also get a sense of the complexity of the problems they're solving every day. And I think when I get too far away from what people are doing, I lose sight of the challenges that they face, and it's tougher for me to understand and translate and support them. So I guess getting out there and being with people where they're working, where they're thinking, is a good thing for me.
That's awesome, and I love it's like the nothing makes the field in the farm go better than the farmer's footsteps. It's also a practice for the Howe Institute and the moral leadership framework of seeing the humanity in every person. It's a wonderful example, and from your heart, right? It's clear for our listeners, this is something that is a genuine care that you bring. So working in many different organizations, our nonprofits that you have served, military, educational institutions, they all come with I don't like the term balance, because balance is bunk in my world, but maybe integrating, or because of your musical background, maybe harmonizing many different stakeholders and diverse and influential voices. What advice do you have for our listeners for navigating those pressures and voices while executing really important tasks that you have at hand and serving the mission of the organization that you have really devoted and committed yourself to in leading?
I think that plays out in different ways at different points in time. But I think you've hit on the fundamental challenge of trying to balance a commitment, a fidelity to mission with all of the interests that people invest institutions with. So they have preconceptions about what you should be doing that may not be aligned with the mission that you have, and may not be aligned with the current circumstances or the future that you think is ahead of the people and the place and the function that an institution is playing. So I think it's ultimately about navigating change. Sometimes I think it helps to show people how much things have changed, even as they feel so committed to a particular vision of that past. You know, history is a very dynamic thing. I mean, literally, the way we understand history changes all the time as we learn different aspects of it, because there's so much happening at any point. We can't see everything all at once, and we privilege some aspects of a story over other aspects of a story, and then we realize another piece, and that one rises to sort of dominate a perspective on something that happened in the past. I think too, they need to know that you hear them, and that's really hard. Communicating is just hard. You know, I've long said to folks who work with me in academic institutions, just because you said something, students have not heard it. And you haven't communicated because you've simply said something in one venue or one forum or in one particular way.
In terms of your being an educator in the classroom, but also, you know, an administrator in education, now shaping public understanding of, you know, 9/11, which in the memorial and museum, you've remained deeply devoted to that education. So how do you see education as a vehicle for developing moral leadership? And I know you've focused a lot on the youth population, the next generations, but you've also focused on all people who are having a touch point with the memorial and the museum.
I think, you know, we're all students in many respects of even, for instance, my children. I learn from my kids all the time. The young people in my life have the capacity to change the way I understand the world and help keep me from failing to reckon with what's happening around me all the time. So it's not just young people who need to learn; it's really all of us. And I think that education without some connection to morality makes very little sense. It's a field that people study, of course. There's particular experts in philosophy and ethics who can help us on this, but really all of us make ethical and moral decisions about what we study and what we do and how we treat people every day. So education, to be meaningful, has to involve some sense of first learning multiple moral frameworks, because there can't be just one that works all the time, and then trying to understand how that sense of what's right might intersect with what's true and what's beautiful and what's effective. And I think it's impossible to separate those things in any of the environments that I've learned and taught in. I feel like they've become intertwined very quickly.
Yeah, I hear you as saying the responsibility for educators, for all of us, but institutions in particular, to develop moral citizens, not just informed ones. And that resonates. I want to share with our listeners that you were a participant and contributor to our How Summit on Moral Leadership in New York City in December of 2024. And one of the topics we discussed there is the pause. And as you well know, in the pause, we talk about 4 R's of the framework of how important it is. As Dov Seidman, our founder and chair, talks about, when you take a pause for a machine, it turns off, but a pause for a human, we actually start. And that's through a reflection, a reconnection, and rethinking, and then reimagining. So my question for you is on this pause notion, to share, if you would, with our listeners, a moment where you felt under pressure and you needed to act quickly, or felt like you needed to act quickly, but instead you chose to pause and take time to do that reflection. Share with us, what were your options and what were the consequences if you had moved forward and reacted?
First, I'll say I think I've not paused nearly enough. I find this a helpful framework when I encountered it, and I'm grateful that you're socializing this more broadly in people because I do find it very instructive. When I got to Mills College, so I had been teaching for some time in classrooms and in different environments, in military training environments. I taught orbital analysts when I was in Space Command in Colorado Springs. And then I taught kids basketball when I was at the Air Force Academy. I had done a lot of different teaching other than academic, faculty, but I had come from teaching in a law school, and I came to a liberal arts college. And when I arrived at Mills College, they were facing some financial challenges, and we had a significant budget deficit. So I started in July, and the board had just adopted in the month of June a budget for the next year with a deficit larger than the college's line of credit. So um, so that our fiscal year ran through June 30. So I was starting underwater essentially. We wouldn't have enough money to pay the bills through the end of the year, through June 30 of the year that I was starting, if we didn't make some changes. But I couldn't really say what to change instantly. I didn't, but I was under some pressure to decide quickly. So we sort of balanced that, and I had been spending time at the college prior to the starting date, actually, in that way that sometimes jobs overlap, that you're working on closing out one while you're starting the next one. I talked to a lot of people and I listened to them. I tried to bring people in who were going to be most impacted by decisions that we made. And then ultimately, together, we decided to take a few steps immediately to reduce costs for the year, but to wait longer, some months, to figure out over the months ahead of us. We probably took about 6 months to do this, to figure out what would be the larger steps that would start to address what was a structural deficit, meaning a deficit that occurred year over year and that wasn't tied to sort of one-time outcomes of a particular academic year of tuition and grants and all the other sources of funds and the expenses that the college incurred throughout the year.
Wow, and a powerful statement. Starting underwater and with the pressures upon you, and yet the pause and the basketball analogy you gave of sometimes going faster isn't always a prudent approach. And so let me go back to saying thank you for participating, and in your busy and very challenging role, an important role leading the 9/11 Memorial and Museum. You took a pause to join us for the full day, as much as you could for the Howe Summit. So thank you for that. And thank you also on behalf of the Howe Institute for stewarding this leadership space, which is really focused on profound loss, courage, and also resilience. And so the question is, how has that enormous responsibility shaped your own leadership? And I want to say, particularly when it comes at trying to inspire hope and a shared sense of purpose.
I often get questions about how well I can how I can manage being at a place that is at the 9/11 Memorial Museum, a place of such loss, as you just pointed out. 9/11 was New York's worst day. It's not a day that's comfortable for many to remember, and it's difficult to encounter the intertwined histories of that day. But I've realized that first, many people heal from encountering the past, including the most challenging parts of the past. And second, a sense of what's possible in terms of recovery is obvious every day at the new World Trade Center, which has been rebuilt, which is thriving. It's a center of commerce, of culture, of learning, and of hope now. And it's a physical testament to the ability to recover after a terrible set of acts of arbitrary violence against the United States and against the world. So for me, that the inspiration that comes and from being at a site where we have rebuilt after the terrible consequences of terrorism is a great opportunity, and we can share it with the people who come to see us. I think too, being here has helped me understand grief and the impact of grief. Just this week, we had a program in the museum where I was reminded of the generative capacity that grief can create in some people, that people do learn and grow. I mentioned before that young people grow relentlessly, and their capacity to learn and their curiosity and the necessity that they learn, that's that's always inspiring to me. But really, trauma and loss can also trigger a reckoning that can lift people in ways they didn't realize. And as we tell stories, as we will in our 25th anniversary special exhibition, tell stories of how people responded to 9/11, really the lasting legacy is the courage, the compassion, and the service that came out of 9/11. I mean, that people came together to find hope amidst all that loss, and also to come together and to be unified.
Yeah, and I hear your message of transformation out of trauma, which is really elevating and inspiring. And I can say on behalf of our listeners, that is a message, right, for all of us individually, all the way through organizations and societies. And so in this 9/11 Memorial Museum, profound emotional historical weight that we have, like many major institutions feeling right now, it also, in addition to that incredible purpose, has operational and business needs. And so the nuts and bolts and the daily grind, or the daily, necessity, how do you navigate the integration of honoring the sacred responsibility of the memory and meeting the practical demands running a sustainable organization?
Our mission is to commemorate what happened on 9/11, to educate people about what happened then and after, and inspire an end to the hatred and intolerance that caused those terrorist attacks. We realized, and the people who built the museum, many still work for us today, an extraordinary collection of individuals who built a beautiful and long-lasting memorial to what happened that day. Fortunately, they also built an economically viable place. People want to come and want to visit, and we were immediately successful in terms of the people coming to the museum and supporting our mission right from the start. And really, the first time a major challenge hit was the pandemic in terms of the finances of the institution. But that was a massive challenge. And again, New York, our board, responded, and in an emergency fundraising campaign, brought in the funds that allowed the museum to stay solvent during a time when we realized we couldn't actually even maintain a minimum level of security and safety on the site without spending more than what we could get with no visitors to the museum and no visitors to the memorial at all. So for me, they've stayed connected. And as we approach the 25th anniversary of 9/11 in 2026, also America's 250th, it's really a time when it feels like our mission to never forget, and to acknowledge what happened and what has happened after, to reckon with 9/11 health effects, which have harmed and killed more people than 9/11 itself, those attacks of 9/11 itself, to share those stories with people who will be reckoning with what it means that we're 25 years past 9/11, and that we have 100 million Americans too young to remember for themselves what happened on 9/11. That's something that feels tied to our economic sustainability and also to our mission itself. So I think that it is possible to pull them together, but you're right that looking at spreadsheets and telling stories of inspiring leadership and incredible courage, those aren't always the same things.
As you make a wave of purpose, courage, and resilience, what's giving you hope right now?
I think that next generations, learning from what has happened in the past. I've always loved history. I was trained as a historian. I've trained as a lawyer too, and law here is often about looking to the past and understanding precedent and how things have played out. For me, the desire of young people to understand what has come before, which they don't always know that they have, but I find they often do when they get a chance to encounter it. That inspires me. And the other thing is also tied to history. The contingency of history really gives me hope, rather than the despair that some people feel. Things could have gone differently at so many different points in time in the past. And if that's the case, then things can go differently today and tomorrow and long into the future based on the acts of individuals and collections of people and institutions. Things change all the time, and people change them. So the sense of a lack of ability to influence and to change things, I find it's a failure of imagination and a misguided sense of what's possible. I don't think humans are very good at understanding what we're capable of. I think we're capable of much more, even in this time of artificial and generative intelligence and the real challenges that this is going to pose. I think we're going to need very different skills as we move ahead. And I don't fully understand what's ahead in terms of workplace structures or in terms of individual learning and growth. I think learning and pedagogy themselves are changing right now, and we have to work hard to understand that. But I would be wrong if I were to underestimate the capacity of people to sort of reckon with that too. So I think that the understanding contingency and that we can actually change things, that gives me hope all the time.
This has been a terrific time to connect in with your great wisdom. We want to say thank you. Thank you for being a friend with How and also exemplifying the How in your life, your love, your leadership, your legacy. Dr. Beth Hillman, enormous thanks. We salute you and we wish you all the best as we embrace this next year commemoration of the 25th of 9/11.
Thank you, Dana. It was good to be here.